Hey everybody, Alex from SeemsGoodMagic.com here. We're doing another Swiss Dragons of Tarkir Fate Reforged draft. We opened Profaner of the Dead, a card I like quite a bit. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in here worthy of mentioning. Yeah, I like Calcisma Behemoth. I like the Sentinels, Sprinting Warbrute, Stampeding Elkherd. I think we'll go with Profaner. There's enough upside to it, and I'm not really passing anything of super substance to give up on it. I mean, the nice thing about Profaner of the Dead, it's got huge potential upside, and at worst, it's a hill giant in blue, so not any real downside, and the upside can potentially be game-changing, so I think it's certainly worthy of a first pick here. Okay, follow-up pick. Well, I think the best card is likely... Well, this is debatable, I guess. I like the Death Fang. It certainly seems like a good follow-up pick after an exploit creature. Otherwise, there's like Mischief Kieran. I think the problem is there's nothing in blue that motivates me to want to stay in blue. Like I'm passing up, if I took like an Ojutai's Breath or a Monastery Loremaster, I'd be passing significantly better cards in Death Fang and Mischief Kieran. So the problem with the Death Fang, well, it's a similar problem to Mischief Kieran in that either one's going to move me into a second color. I think I'm okay with taking the Death Fang. Synergistically, like I said, it does pair well with the Profaner, and it works very well within its colors in that you're going to find stuff that either exploits or makes each player sacrifice or something like that. I guess I'll take the Death Fang. I think that it's pretty close to... I wouldn't argue... Anybody's argument to take the Mischief Kieran there, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think either of those options are very much acceptable. Here's a pretty easy Aven, which certainly makes me happy for picking up the Death Fang, 'cause now we're going to have a couple exploit creatures, both of which are very good. So I'm a big supporter, advocate of the Aven, happy to take it here, and not really passing anything of super substance other than the Vulturous Aven. I guess we could hope to table Zephyr Scribe. I haven't successfully made Skywise Teachings like broken yet. I've played it a couple times, and it turns out to be usually about as underwhelming as it looks, unfortunately. But it's a playable card. I will say that. It's playable. I'm not going to say good, but I will say playable. Okay. So now we have Shambling Goblin, which is a very good exploit target. There's also Living Lore. There's also Custodian of the Trove, which is a card I like quite a bit. I might be willing to give Living Lore a try. I mean, the thing is, if we're in blue, there's a pretty decent chance we'll not only get, well, we're certainly going to get non-creature spells, but on top of that, I think we're very likely to find, I'm trying to think what this works best with. I mean, we could also find some self-mill pretty easily, so we can at least fuel our graveyard for it. I don't know. I kind of want to give a Living Lore a try. I'm giving up a Shambling Goblin and a Custodian of the Trove, so I feel like it's worth giving a try here. I don't really care about those cards I passed all that much. Okay, the best card remaining in here is probably Berserker or Aspirant. I'm leaning towards Aspirant. I'm just a big fan of this card. We could take the Deadly Wanderings. This is a tough card to make work, especially since our first four cards are creatures, but I think Deadly Wandering is actually a pretty good card. It's certainly more exciting than the Skirmisher. And Tygum Strike's not really the deck for it. Okay, I'll bite. I'll take the Deadly Wanderings. I think, like I said, there's a pretty good chance we don't end up playing it, but it can be a good card. Okay, Hand of Silumgar, on the other hand, very powerful, so happily take that. Otherwise, Ambuscade Shaman, but blue-black is typically not the direction for that. I don't think Blessed Reincarnation is all that good, but it is a playable card nonetheless. All right, let's slam a Hand of Silumgar here. Okay, now we have Gadul Lurker, which is a fine card, and we have Anticipate. I think I'm going to take the Anticipate. it's something to do with living lore, and I'm just a big fan of Anticipate in general. It's really nice card for blue-black if they have to find their removal or their exploit or whatever you're looking for. It's just nice. It's played quickly. You can leave up counter spells and still anticipate if you don't need to counter anything. I do actually think a Dual Lurker is pretty good too. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I like a Dual Lurker, but I think I just prefer the Anticipate here. Well, I like Ojutai Summons, and it pairs well with Living Lore, but I think I'm going to take the Palace Familiar. It just pairs better with our Profaner and our Vulturous Haven, and when in blue-black, I think Palace Familiar is a pretty important card. But yeah, I would love to have the summons as well. But yeah, let's go ahead and take the Familiar here. Okay, so this could be a time to take a Negate. I think it's certainly a playable card. Otherwise, Ancestral Statue. I've mentioned this in the last couple drafts, I think, but this is a good card for getting rid of the Reduce in Stature pacifism effects, which is actually kind of nice. But let's take the Negate. I think there's a pretty high chance we'll see another Ancestral Statue. And it's a foil Negate. How can you pass that? Alright, well, we table an Ojutai's Breath. Typically this card's better in like a blue-white tempo-y thing. Probably a lot less impressive in a blue-black deck, but certainly still a playable card and more exciting than the remaining cards in here, so we'll take it. Okay, I think Pinion Feast is one of those cards that's going to be good against us, and we're not really a deck that's going to need a Spider Silk Net, so we can hate that. Alright, Gate Smasher. Currently don't have that many 4 toughness guys, so I don't think that's going to work out. I think I'd rather hate a Scale Blessing. It's a combat trick. Alright, we'll take the Nemesis just to cut blue, and I would prefer to not play it, but in a pinch I can. Alright, I would say it's a relatively successful pack 1. The powerhouse cards we got are the Profaner, Vulturous Haven, Ruthless Deathfang, and Palace Familiar. So, not a bad start. Okay, I think we're just going to slam Vulturous Haven number 2, passing on a Shambling Goblin, a River Skeleton, Coat with Venom on color cards that I think are good. Our Foe Razor Regent is a good card, but I'm not going to branch out into that. I think we're just going to slam a Vulturous Haven pretty happily here. Okay, so we've got an interesting choice here. Illusory Gains is a pretty good card. There's really high upside and some pretty major downside to it too, since you're not always in control of what you get. But next closest is like Ojutai Summons, which, like I said, is good with Living Lore. You know what? I'm going to take Illusory Gains. I've played against it. I've played with it. I don't hate the card. I think overall it's satisfactory playable. You really wish it was a mind control, and it's not, but it's certainly still a pretty powerful effect, so I'll take it. Okay, I think we take Palace Familiar number 2 here over the Hand of Silumgar and Minister of Pain and Silumgar Monument. If we could table one of those 3 cards, I'd be pretty happy, but this certainly looks like a great spot for Palace Familiar. Okay, open a Drowner. I think we're going to slam that. I also like the Monument here. The Butcher would be fine, and Custodian at this point is pretty good too, especially with the Profaner. What was the card I took over that? I think I took a Deadly Wanderings over it. I guess that maybe could come back to bite me, but it's not like the end-all be-all. It's just a card that works well with one of our rares. But Drowner here is certainly excellent. Drowner is a fantastic card. And this is actually a card that's going to work really well if I can make the Living Lore work, because it fuels our graveyard. So I like it. We'll take it. I'm really going out on a limb there, aren't I? Saying Gurmag Drowner is a good card. Okay, well, this is a pretty straightforward pick. We're just going to slam a Foul Tongue Invocation. Sack effects, actually, Actually, I think second Drowner is the correct pick now that I think about it. I do think Foul Tongue Invocation is good, but I think Drowner has more potential upside. And I mean, Drowners and Vulturous Avens, let's face it, they're the backbone of the blue-black exploit deck. So you really do want to pick these guys up. Yes, granted, we're getting a little bit congested in the 4-drop slot, but ultimately I think worth it for these really powerful cards. Okay, I could take Contradict. I think we probably just want the Reduce in Stature. I actually don't like the Reduce in Stature that much, but it's a card that can deal with some threats, and we're currently hunting pretty hard for those, so I guess we'll take it. Alright, Palace Familiar is a pretty easy, straightforward pickup here. Nothing really close otherwise. I'm not a big Sadist fan. I've had a couple people comment that I should probably be valuing this card higher. I just don't really like it. But that being said, nothing else in here that I really care about, so we'll cut the exploit guy. Alright, Shambling Goblin Tabled seems like a pretty easy, straightforward pickup. Very good against the hyper-aggressive decks with a lot of, like, you know, Kolaghan Aspirants or Dromoka Warriors, stuff like that. I guess it's not the greatest blocker against a Kolaghan Aspirant, but it does trade with it, so pretty nice at 1 mana, and certainly the pick here. Ooh, Dutiful Attendant. All right, well, I very much like picking up all this ammo for our exploit cards, so pretty happily taking Dutiful Attendant here. Another card that just is excellent with Gurmag Drowner. Filling your graveyard while, you know, fishing at creatures out of your graveyard. Very nice. Mind Rot seems like pretty straightforward, easy pickup. Ooh, Custodian Table. Pretty happy about that since I really do want to play this card in our deck. At this point, I think we can start ditching these Nemesis, which are just pretty underpowered cards in my mind. But yes, pretty happily taking Custodian. All right, we'll take the statue for the sideboard. Versus pacifisms, it can be kind of nice. I don't think we're going to likely play Tapestry of the Ages. Hate a Kindled Fury, because pretty surprised to see that second from last, actually. It's a pretty nice card. Currently looking like we've got too many creatures to possibly make Deadly Wanderings work, so I think there's a pretty high chance we're going to ditch that in pack 3 here. Usually I'm not the biggest fan of main decking Mind Rot. As someone mentioned, I seem to open Rally the Ancestors more than anybody else. So we do have a Sultai Emissary, which is once again very good with our exploit, but I think we got to take the Reach of Shadows. And that's probably the best card we've found so far that's going to work well with the Living Lore. I'd still like to live the pipe dream of making Living Lore work. I also think Lotus Patch In would be a nice pickup despite already being congested in the 4-drop slot, but happily taking Reach of Shadows here, hoping to wheel Sultai Emissary, but that is probably wishful thinking. Well, we got past the second Reach of Shadows, so I'll happily oblige that. I also think Meringue River Prowler is pretty playable in this deck, and Sultai Skullkeeper and Whisk Away would also be fine options. It'd be nice to table one of those, but yeah, we're certainly taking a second Reach of Shadows. And I think we're ready to axe Deadly Wanderings at this point. Like I said, just too many creatures in our deck to successfully make that card work. Wow, the old double Shu Yun pack. That's pretty surprising, actually. Shu Yun's not, like, insane in this deck. It's pretty much just a 3-drop, 3-2. Could take the Typhoid Rats. I think we want the Surveyor. There's just a lot of upside to this card. I love the Aven Surveyor. And just a really strong card. Hope to wheel Rats, Rite of Undoing, Shu Yun. Any of those would right into being any of those would be a fine wheel, but there's a lot of upside to Aven Surveyor. Just a really good card to buy time, and one I like quite a bit. And it's an evasive creature, so there really is no downside to Aven Surveyor that I can think of. What's the next cut? I'm ditching Karsi Sadist. I just don't really like this card. All right, we can take Typhoid Rats. We can take Gurmag Angler. I'm actually thinking I want this Angler quite a bit. Our early game is already satisfactory, and to be honest, we don't really have that many finishers. We have a Ruthless Deathfang and some Vulturous Avens, and that's about it. So I think we actually really want this Angler. couple that with the fact that we have double Gurmag Drowner, which is just going to be great fuel for Angler. Yeah, I actually think Angler is just a super powerhouse card in this deck. And at this point, I'm ready to cut possibly the main deck Negate. I think main deck Negate is fine. Maybe the Mind Rot instead, actually. Some people are bigger fans of Mind Rot than I am. I think Mind Rot's fine, but I'm not the biggest fan of discard effects main deck. Bigger fan sideboard. There's just some matches you're not going to be happy with it. All right, Karsi High Priest has some excellent synergy with Ruthless Deathfang. It actually has pretty good synergy with Palace Familiar as well, and Shambling Goblin. Could be a Karsi High Priest. Otherwise, the Whisk Away would be a pretty significant upgrade to Ojutai's Breath in my mind, seeing as it's more of a, I don't know, I think it's a little more devastating putting it on top of their library rather than just tapping it down. But I think, you know what, I think High Priest in this deck could have some pretty big upside, even with illusory gains. Stealing a creature and then they play something else and they want you to take that instead and you can just sack it and get rid of their biggest guy. Yeah, you know what? I think this is absolutely a Karsi High Priest deck. And I think at this point, we're probably just going to run it over the Negate. All right, Angler number 2. This card is not getting any worse in our deck at all in multiples, so happily taking it. And let's do a count on Living Lore. I actually think Living Lore might not be good enough. We do have Double Reach of Shadows, but other than that, it's just like an Ojutai's Breath and it anticipates. So you know what? Living Lore, not good enough, and Gurmag Angler, happily taking you. Ooh, you know what? Monastery Siege is actually an excellent card in this deck for a couple reasons. The fact that we discard from it fuels our Gurmag Angler, but it also is just a really nice way to get some card advantage. So I like it. I mean, granted, you're not actually netting cards, but it does significantly increase your card quality, and I think it's a very powerful card. So happily taking Monastery Siege, and at this point, you know what, I think I might at this point be willing to cut Reduce in Stature. Overall, it's a mediocre card, and I think it actually might be worse than Ojutai's Breath, at least main deck, so we'll go Siege there for sure. What do I least want to play against? I don't really think we're going to need Vengeance. This card's been fairly underwhelming. I think Warflare is probably the most devastating card. If someone's, I mean, granted, someone has to be in red and white, but it's a really powerful card. This card is one of the enemy color cycles that significantly got stronger, I would say, in Dragons and Fate Reforged format, if you're in those colors. Okay, didn't manage to table anything on color, which is fine because we already have a deck, and a deck I like quite a bit, actually. Let's take the Harsh Sustenance, another one of those enemy color cards that has high upside. All right, we've got a River Prowler and a Skullkeeper. So Skullkeeper does a good job of fueling anglers, but I think River Prowler there's certainly enough. I mean, it can't block, which is a bit of an issue. But the fact that you can get it back from your graveyard is kind of nice, especially alongside the Drowners. Synergistically speaking, I think Meringue River Prowler could be a good card. It synergizes really well with High Priest too. All right, I convinced myself we'll take it. All right, we did table Rite of Undoing. I'll pretty happily take that. I don't think we actually need to main deck it, although I think it's actually fine in this deck. It actually pairs really well with Exploit too and Surveyor. I'll consider it. I don't think we're going to main deck it, but it is an option. All right. Rakshas's Disdain. Sideboard, possibly. We look like a deck that could potentially fill our graveyard. So I think we can... Yeah, I think we can pretty easily get away with a 17 land deck here. I don't think we need to go 18. Hate the Rune Mark. It seems like it could be good against us, possibly. So what's the weakest card in our deck currently that I would like to cut? Could be the Ojutai's Breath, actually. All right, Enhanced Awareness is fine. I don't think we need it with Double Haven, Double Drowner. I think we're actually fine on card advantage spells. So I think the Ojutai's Breath is probably going to get cut, which I do have to do a final count on our removal at that point. It looks as though we don't really get to do removal until turn 5, which could be problematic. But I feel like we set up a decent defense early with Shambling Goblin, Hand of Silumgar, Palace Familiars for days. Custodian's good defensively. I think so. We don't really get to start removal until turn 5, which could be a problem. But our 5-drop removal is definitely strong. I think there's a pretty high chance we're going to end up playing. We'd probably like the River Prowler over the Ojutai's Breath. I'm not unhappy with this deck. I actually think this deck looks pretty good. I think some of the major shortcomings are Profaner doesn't have as much fuel as I would like. It's pretty much got Custodian, Deathfang, and Double Angler, which is okay. Not great, but satisfactory. Yeah, I think this deck could definitely win a draft. I think its shortcomings are not that bad, and the upsides are quite nice. So I'm interested in trying out this Illusory Gains and seeing what I think. I think it's possible we could get steamrolled, but I really do think the Palace Familiar's Hand of Silumgar, Shambling Goblin should help with that quite a bit. The major issue with River Prowler is that it can't block, which is not ideal for decks like this, but I do like how it works synergistically with your exploit effects, since you can bring it back from your graveyard if you control a black permanent. So I think we have enough black permanents where we can make that work out. So yeah, I think ultimately we're going to run it like this. And pretty comfortable with 17 lands. I mean, with 3 or less, I can play 11 spells. That's pretty good. That's like a fourth of our deck is 3 mana or less. Triple Palace Familiar is and with the draw card effects we get from Vulturous Haven and Drowners, we should be able to really not have mana issues that I can think of. And the Drowner just straight up lets us cast Angler, so we've got some good synergies in here. I think this deck is pretty good. We have some cool rares too. I like this deck. I think it looks nice. Looks like we're almost dead even on blue and black, so I guess we'll err towards blue, which I expect them to do anyway, and they do. So, yeah, good looking deck. Looks pretty fun, pretty straightforward. Yeah, not much else to say. I guess we'll see you round 1.